there's always the urge to say, okay, let's test our roster and see what it looks like going forward. But then there's always the locker room. And right. And there's
Yeah.
always the CeeDee Lambs of the world and the Donovan Wilsons of the world that are like, don't you dare give up on this season. I'm not going to go out there and bust my ass every single day. And we've waved the white flag. And this is just, hey, let's get a look at this like it's a preseason game and we're trying to evaluate our roster. I'm not into that.
Welcome to the NFL on Fox podcast presented by Verizon, the NFL powered by Verizon 5G. I am your host, Dave Helman. Welcome to the Week 12 preview. Kind of feels like one last big breath before the holiday season. Soon as this batch of NFL games are over, we will jump right in to Thanksgiving week. 3 big games on Thursday. Start getting ready for your holiday plans, whether you're traveling, whether you're hosting, whatever you got on the menu, whatever you got lined up for next week. It'll all be here before you know it. So I'm just, I'm taking it in, getting ready for it, getting ready for a very fun week 12 in the NFL. And it's finally starting, really feeling like football season. Maybe it's a delayed reaction because we're out here in LA, but even here in LA, you're getting the crispness of the fall weather. It's hoodie weather, starting to feel chilly. The games are starting to feel more meaningful. And boy, is that ever the case, as the dust has kind of settled on Separation Saturday from last week. If that's what last week was, and we learned things and we separated contenders and all the good stuff we said about week 11. Now we get to see how everybody follows up on it. If you made a statement last weekend, can you keep it going? Can you find some consistency? Can you prove the narrative's correct? Or maybe if you were on the short end of that, can you pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and get back after it as we approach the final third of the season? That's how I'm feeling as we head into week 12. Lot to talk about. Got Greg Olsen coming on later to preview a Dallas Cowboys Washington Commanders game that feels vastly different from any in the last, I don't know, at least 10, if not many more years. That was the theme of Greg and I's conversation, a matchup that has completely subverted the preseason expectations between the Cowboys and Commanders. Also have my buddy Eric Williams on, talk about a big NFC West game in the Pacific Northwest, Cardinals at Seahawks. Huge game between those two division rivals. But first, as we always like to do, had Peter Schrager on at the top of the show to go through all of the big games and some of the biggest storylines in the NFL heading into week 12. We covered Packers, Niners, huge one in the late window on Fox, talked about the Lions and the potentially historic role that they are on, plus 2 big games right here in LA, Sunday and Monday Night Football, both happening at SoFi Stadium. Big game, the Harbowl, maybe you've heard of it, Ravens, Chargers on Monday night, as well as Eagles, Rams on Sunday night. So LA kind of feeling like one of the epicenters of the NFL world on week 12. All of that to get to, plus so much more with Peter Schrager at the top of the show.
All right, Peter, we got actual good games and actual good teams to talk about in this segment. I don't want to spend the whole time on this, but we're deep into our second season doing this chat every week. And it feels like a tradition at this point that every other time I have you on, something terrible and embarrassing has happened to one of the New York teams. And this week it's both. So between the Daniel Jones benching and the Joe Douglas firing up in New York, I feel like I got to check in with you about these New York franchises. And I think at this point, I'm basically just curious, will either of them ever be good again?
I have an 8-year-old son, and I grew up a Giants fan. Saw the New York Giants win 4 different Super Bowls in my lifetime. I really remember just 3 of them, 90, and of course, '07 and 11. And those are really important memories for my family, my dad, me, my brother. Like that's football. And I think most franchises have those moments. My son is 8. He has seen 1 playoff appearance in his life, and it was the Giants a couple of years ago, and it was a vague, like almost like a hallucinogenic dream of Daniel Jones beating Kirk Cousins in Minnesota. Other than that, it has just been one terrible, terrible Jets and Giants team after another. Jets haven't made it in 13 years. Giants have made it twice in the last decade. And both programs seem to be going in the wrong direction despite another missed and lost season. And I'll wear the Jets thing as much as anybody. I came on this show with you. I was very big on Bill Simmons. I was very big on Good Morning Football. And the clip has been sent along more than any of these political pundits saying Kamala was going to win. I feel like I was very loud and very proud and very confident that the Jets were going to be awesome this year. I thought 12 wins. I thought AFC East title. I thought 1 seed in the AFC because I was around them quite a bit this summer, and the roster was star-studded. They had 9 guys on defense that were first, potentially first-team All-Pros, household names. They had, Garrett Wilson. They had Breece Hall healthy. They had Aaron Rodgers fully healthy, and they had a rebuild offensive line. They swung the bat really hard, and they whiffed, and they continued to whiff with every subsequent move after it was clearly obvious that this team wasn't going anywhere. And now they're in a real hole. Fired the head coach, fired the GM. And I'm not an apologist. I'm not. But I still look at the roster and I still see a really good group of players. And I'm like, if things had gone a different way and things had bounced the ball differently, like they would be still relevant. But Jets and Giants, neither fan base right now even needs to watch football. And that's a shame. We haven't even hit Thanksgiving yet.
I've been doing that all year. I mean, I'm right there with you. You're not going to hear anything from me. I thought Garrett Wilson could win Offensive Player of the Year. I thought the Jets were a playoff team. My only real question with them, and you're already hearing whispers. I mean, I get it. Aaron Rodgers is in his 40s. I don't know what GM wants to take over that situation. Like, it seems on the surface like that experiment might be over with, which leads to a whole lot of questions about, like, where does Rodgers play if he keeps playing, or do the Jets look for a GM that would be willing to take Rodgers on? Do you have any inkling of where we go with that?
Well, a couple things. One, and this goes for all these teams, whether it be Jacksonville or Cleveland or anything, like, don't get it twisted. There's only 32 head coaches. There's only 32 GMs. Everyone is a savage killer. If you're a front office person and you're a coach, you want one of those jobs. That's the goal. So would anyone even want this job? There will be a line 30 deep, like there is for every other GM job, for one of these lifelong personnel people to go in and get that opportunity to be the general manager in an NFL team. With being a general manager, you get a huge bump in pay. Now, a lot of GMs will make several $1,000,000 a year, and the next level down makes several $100,000 a year. So you're talking maybe the biggest gap in anything in sports, from going from front office executive, number 2, number 3, to being the guy. So that's one thing. It's life-changing money. Second thing, they've built their entire career to get there. Now, the Rodgers situation. I haven't spoken to Aaron about it. We do have a relationship, but we haven't talked about next year. The Jets can get out of this thing with no more guaranteed money at the end of this season. I truly believe Aaron Rodgers is going to be able to decide whether he wants to finish his career as a New York Jet or leave football altogether. I don't see Rodgers playing for one of these other teams and doing the Favre and doing the Russell Wilson bounce around team to team and figure it out. Like, I think he'll either stick around for the Jets for another run at this thing, or I could see Rodgers being like, you know what, like, I had a great career and I actually had failed in New York, but we had good intentions. I can't see Rodgers doing this a third time and going and trying to start anew at age 42. That's just me. That's my opinion. He really likes playing in New York. It's gone terribly. I do think that he and the owners do have a solid relationship. I'd be fascinated to see if they want him back and if a new general manager or new head coach would go into that not knowing the future of Aaron Rodgers ahead of time.
Sounds like the perfect storyline for, like, Super Bowl week, maybe Indianapolis later on in 2025.
Well, I'll ask you. You followed this game a long time. Like, do you think Rodgers just goes out like this year? Like, I don't see it that way. I can't imagine this being his last season and him just being like, you know what? Farewell to football. That's how I'm going to end it.
He strikes me as way too competitive and way too willing to prove everybody wrong to just take this lying down. But at the same time, I was going to say it's hard for me to imagine Aaron Rodgers catching a commercial flight to Pittsburgh the way that Russell Wilson did. You
Same.
know what I mean? So,
Visiting the Giants like Russell Wilson did
yeah.
and selling his wares. I don't see it.
I don't see it
No.
either. So I think you might be onto something with the idea that like it's either the Jets or retirement. But if the Jets actually have the stones to pull the Band-Aid off and say like, no way, we're starting completely over from scratch. I don't know. Maybe if Aaron Rodgers is forced to enter that wilderness, maybe I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what he does.
I look,
But
I obviously I called preseason games for the Jets. I've been around them a lot, so people already look at me as if I've got green colored glasses, and my opinion doesn't matter. Fine, that's okay. Let me give you a different look at this thing, though. They swung the bat, and like there are so many mediocre franchises that like just go up there and they take pitch after pitch and they don't swing the bat. Like, the Jets went all in and it failed miserably. It was a disastrous dumpster fire by the end of the whole thing. But like, I never can spite a GM or an owner for going for it, and they went for it. They went for it, and the Devontae stuff, the Mike Williams, the you name it, like Tyron Smith. There was a lot of telltale signs that Tyron Smith's best football was done in Dallas. Jets went for it. They were all in. They were going for it. And I don't spite them for taking a swing. I really don't. And even as he's been fired and Joe Douglas on, like, I don't look back at his 5 years as like him being a terrible GM. I actually appreciate that he got up at bat and he swung with his one opportunity.
I can tie it back to Dallas as I so often do, but a similarly bad season playing out with the Cowboys, and I think Cowboy fans would rather be sitting in a situation where they swung the bat and had it blow up in their face than just kind of stood at the plate the way the Cowboys did this offseason. So I hear you. I think that's a very valid point. It's never good in New York, but I'm intrigued to see where it goes. Out of curiosity, your son
Yeah.
is 8. The Giants
Yeah.
have been terrible for that whole time. You cover the entire league, so he's got a lot of reason to watch a lot of different teams. Like, is he
Yeah,
true
he's got a
blue?
team. No, no, no. He went. So I'm not around on weekends, which is a whole thing for his therapy couch when he gets older. Because I'm at Fox every Sunday during football
Sure.
season. But he's got friends who are fortunate enough to go to football games, and they'll take him along. And my son went to the Giants Vikings season opener. They lost 28-6. He went to the Eagles game where Saquon ran all over them, and he went to one more. I think 3 was enough. My son is fortunate enough to have a mother who grew up in Baltimore and grandparents who are
Nice.
Ravens fans. So at least he's had a taste. But I brought him with me to the AFC Championship game last year, and that was a long train ride home after they were the favored team against the Chiefs and lost that game. So he's had some losses even with the Ravens in the playoffs in his life too. But he's a Ravens fan.
You remember your first heartbreak way more than like your first exhilarating moment anyway. At
What
least
was
I do.
yours? Cowboys or Saints? What was your team?
Oh,
growing up?
actually, okay, we're getting off the track here, but
This
I
is
was
better.
actually
This is better than my thoughts on the Broncos quarterback. Let's go. Let's
I
hear it.
was thinking about this last week because they played each other. 1999, the Cleveland Browns got their first win after coming back from
Hail
leaving
Mary.
town.
Hail Mary.
Against the piss poor New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Mike Ditka, I want to say the Ditka Saints.
I was like 9 or 10 years old being like, we suck so much we can't even beat the new team. Like, this is embarrassing.
Tim Couch to Dennis Northcutt, I want to say, or Kevin Johnson. It might have
better
been
than
Kevin
me.
Johnson.
I-
We might have
I
to
don't
show the
remember a lot
clip
of it.
of you crying as like a 10-year-old kid, and then also the Tim Couch Hail Mary in the corner of the end zone, which I remember very
Those
well.
were like this. The Superdome turf used to be like neon green, and the end zones were black, and the Saints couldn't beat frickin' anybody.
The
So,
irony is, like, for me, I grew up a Yankee fan. And of course, in high school for me was the late 90s. It was great. But the Yankees had like this window from like 88 to like 93 where they were like just terrible and they were a joke. And I have such fondness for like Randy Velarde and Andy Stankiewicz and Pat Kelly, the guys before Jeter and before Bernie, that like I bet as a Saints fan growing up, you have a fondness for those Jim Haslett teams right before the
yeah.
Sean Payton teams, because it was like those were the guys and I was there when it was bad, you know?
Yeah, the 2000 the Aaron Brooks Saints have a very dear
Yeah.
place in my heart, and I
Chris
mean
McAllister.
Oh, Deuce is my favorite Saint of all time. Shout out Deuce. Fun to go down. Yeah, the point being, the suffering is what makes it worth it. So, in a way, it's good that your son got that experience, I
I love
think.
it.
So,
I love
all
it.
right, let's dive into these Week 12 games. I have a very important question for you. The late window Fox game, Lambeau Field, Niners Packers. I don't need to do a whole lot to set it up, obviously, even with the Niners being 5-5. This is a game with a lot of juice. But I'm just curious, are the Niners the unluckiest, just most unclutch team in the league, or are they actually cooked? Because I went back, Peter, and I went and rewatched these broadcasts, like week 3 against the Rams, week 6 against the Cardinals, and last week against Seattle. You can get it down to about 3 plays where if they go the other way, San Francisco's 8-2. Their statistics all look fine. Like all the nerdy metrics say that they're a-okay. They're like 3 plays away, like a missed field goal. Ronnie Bell drops a 30-yard bomb
It's the
in
Rams.
LA.
Yeah.
Jordan Mason fumbles on the 10-yard line against the Cardinals. Like they are so close to having one of the league's best records. So, do you think they're unlucky, or do you actually think they're kind of bad?
Look, I thought the vibes were off this whole summer with the Ayuk deal and Trent Williams not being there, and that they came so close to a Super Bowl. And there was all this stuff about the defensive coordinator, and they fired Wilkes. And I'm like, let me see what happens. I'm not surprised they're not what they were. I am surprised they're this record, and they've lost to all 3 divisional opponents already. Huge game, and yet Kyle Shanahan has a bit of mind control over Matt LaFleur. He's won 4 out of the 6 games. He's won several playoff games, including last year's playoff game, where the Packers gave him everything they could and their kicker missed that kick. And then Jordan Love threw that bad pick. So, again, second half of the season, sky is falling in San Francisco. I get it. Why is Debo, not getting thrown the ball in the right place? Is Brock Purdy worth the money? There's a lot of things to argue about. That said, they're a couple division wins away from being in first place hosting a playoff game. So huge game in Lambeau. You don't want to go under 500 in second half of the season, of course. But I think even if they lose this game, that division's still so wide open, and I'm not sold on the Cardinals being the team that's going to be representing that division in the playoffs.
I hear you. And so now I'm curious for your thoughts on like probabilities and all those fun percentages that we love to throw out, because the number that's going around on the internet right now is that the Niners playoff probability jumps to 50% if they win this game, and it falls down below 20% if they lose. So like I hear what you just said, and I
Yeah.
agree. Like NFC West looks completely wide open, but the nerds are telling me that a loss here would be a big deal for San Francisco.
They've been there before. They've had big wins and big moments, and we've seen this quarterback, despite his lack of, huge statistical numbers over the course of his career, win big games. He did it last year in the playoffs twice, did it against the Packers, did it against the Lions. Now, granted, those were home. I can't get off the ship on the 49ers before Thanksgiving. I won't. Even if they lose on Sunday, I am still saying that is a team that I would expect to see playing in the playoffs.
Fun storyline. You mentioned it on the other side of this for the Packers is just I love like the coaching world is so small. Matt LaFleur and Kyle Shanahan go way back. They're good buddies. But how much must LaFleur want to like drive the stake into Shanahan's heart this week? Like
A
just
lot.
to prove he can beat him, to maybe at least get the Niners out of the playoffs. Like if he could eliminate or be a part of eliminating San Francisco so they're not his problem in January, that would have to be a really meaningful win for him.
2 of the worst Packers losses in recent memory would be the NFC Championship game out in San Francisco, where Raheem Mostert ran for about 300 yards and 20 touchdowns that sent the Niners to play the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. Aaron Rodgers was having an outstanding season, lost that way. Of course, you have the Buccaneers loss in the playoffs, NFC Championship game. LaFleur decides to kick a field goal. They never get the ball back. Fine. But I would argue that Saturday night divisional round loss where Rodgers was, his COVID season, he was popping off about all his thoughts that were off the field stuff. He was public enemy number 1. And the Niners came into that building in frigid weather, and their
Brutal.
special teams found a way to get the best of Green Bay. And that one is the one that still sticks with me, because who knows? The Rams go on to the Super Bowl that year, and they go on to represent, and they win that could have been the Packers year. And I think LaFleur still will never forget that. And there's been several losses since, but I would think as as minuscule as this is compared to that, I would imagine that he would like to get the best of Kyle Shanahan in Lambeau because he didn't get him that night.
Weird stat for the Packers, but it makes sense. ESPN is giving the Packers a better chance to reach the Super Bowl than win their own division.
Yeah, I'd see
11%
that.
chance.
I see that. I see
Yeah.
that. I see Detroit as a locomotive, but you get me in the playoffs and anything goes. I see that.
Let's talk about those Detroit Lions. They're at the Colts early window on Fox in Indianapolis. I'm not saying the Colts don't have a chance, but like I'm a lot less interested in breaking down the actual matchup as I am at just looking at what the Lions are doing right now. And I know 7 games is a lot. Like I get it. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but Peter, they're on pace for 571 points.
Yeah.
And I was curious. I went and looked. I went back to 2002.
Is that the highest scoring team ever?
There are 2 teams since the realignment in '02 that have scored more points than this. I bet you can get it because they're real obvious.
Okay, so the '07 Patriots.
Absolutely.
And I would say the 2013 Broncos.
You are 100% correct.
Yeah, yeah.
So
those are 2 dynamic offenses. Yeah.
the only teams that have been doing or that did it better, and I mean maybe they could fall off, but I really doubt it, barring some significant injuries. The only teams doing it better than this Lions team are a 16-0 team and statistically the best offense ever that got to the Super Bowl.
Here's the fun factoid after. What do those 2 teams have in common?
They did not win the Super Bowl.
Come on now. Come on now. Come on now. Yeah, no, Detroit's really fun. And I thought it was like almost like it felt like I was watching Jake Paul fight Mike Tyson watching that game against the Jaguars. And we'll see if Doug Peterson still is employed by the end of this week. Keep an eye on that. I know it hasn't happened yet, but it's their bye week. Let's see what happens. But they have no problem. They're like a college team. They have no problem piling it on. They piled it on against the Cowboys. A lot of people thought that was unsavory. And then they did this to the Jaguars of all teams, which it's like,
Titans
what do you have
as well?
Yeah, what do you have against these guys? But like that's just their style. Like if you don't like it, stop us. Which, yeah, it's refreshing in a way. Like we've been bad for so long. We're not gonna give you this moment. Like we're gonna be that team. But I think playoff football is different, and you ain't playing the Jaguars in the playoffs.
I'm glad you sort of teased the coaching situation because I'm so curious. You're an insider. You're tied into all these sorts of conversations and the coaching searches when they start to happen. You know that the NFL trips over itself to copy the best culture going at the time that the jobs are open. So I'm so excited to see the way that the NFL tries to recreate this Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes situation. Like whether it's, I mean, we know Ben Johnson's going to be a coveted name, Aaron Glenn as well. But even on the other side of that, like I feel like teams are going to be looking for their own version of this. Not to always bring it back to the Cowboys, but Jerry Jones caused a stir the other day when he brought up Jason Witten. I just feel like NFL teams are going to be tripping over themselves looking for this like glass eating sort of culture creator this year.
And that's it. Like you look at Detroit, Chris Spielman's a part of that organization. You look at San Francisco, like John Lynch, even with the Jets here, they just, blew out their GM. And it's like, there's a local push for, okay, bring back Bill Parcells or bring in Rex Ryan or bring in Curtis Martin. We need culture. And it's such like a hard to define thing. And we don't want number crunchers. We don't want scouts. We want culture. Culture's hard. Culture takes forever. The Lions have discovered it.
Big part of culture is also just nailing a bunch of badass draft picks
and winning and go win. You win, culture follows. Trust me.
Interesting stat on Anthony Richardson. I think this is only the 3rd time, and I know he hasn't played a lot. This is only the 3rd time Anthony Richardson started against a team with a winning record. This is quite easily the best NFL team that he's ever started against. He went against Pittsburgh earlier this year, and they played Houston earlier this year. But I think this is the biggest opponent Anthony Richardson's ever played, and I'm gonna guess. Even in the early window, this might be the most people that are paying attention to an Anthony Richardson game.
Agreed. He played the Jets, had a really cool performance and lowered the shoulder, did all that. But like the jury's still out on him. And I guess a lot of eyeballs will be on him. Now, I don't see the AFC South as a division I need to see much more of, especially in big games. I feel the same way about the NFC South, if I'm being candid. Despite I love Baker and I love what the Saints are doing under Darren Rizzi. And of course, the Falcons, when they're good, they're good. But like, it's cream rising to the top time now. And I don't know if we're going to see an AFC South or NFC South team going further than one round in the playoffs.
Sunday Night Football, the Eagles coming out here to LA to take on the Rams. You wrote about a pet cause of mine that I'm really excited about in your cheat sheet. That would be this Zach Bond story, who
Former
signs
Saint.
afterthought Saints player. No offense to him, but he was like a situational pass rusher for the Saints for a few years. Wasn't a bad player, but he got a $1.6 million contract in the offseason. So that tells you what the league thought of him. And the dude might be an all pro when the season's over. I don't think that's an exaggeration.
March 11th, the Eagles steal all the headlines. First day of free agency, they signed Saquon Barkley for 3 years, $40 million. It's a massive deal. It goes, and then quietly that day, Howie Roseman inked a deal for a special teams, fifth linebacker, Zach Bond, for 1 year, $1.6 million. Vaughn is unbelievable. He was the NFC's Defensive Player of the Week 2 weeks ago. He had 15 tackles in the game-saving tackle on the fourth down last week. And he's kind of symbolic of what this Eagles defense has been over this past 12 months. They've been reborn. All of a sudden, you go from a squad that everyone was picking apart, had multiple coordinators, to now being one of the most feared units in the league. And it's not Brandon Graham who's been fine. It's not Darius Slay who's been fine. It's guys like Bond. It's guys like Quinyon Mitchell, a rookie. It's guys like Josh Sweat, who's been there. And it's guys like Cooper DeJean. Like, it's a whole different crew and vibe. And they're going to be playing the Rams. And it's interesting. The Rams have two great rookies in Jared Verse and Braden Fisk. And the Eagles have two great rookies in Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell. And I think like the biggest name out there might be the Zach Bond on defense, who just has 15 tackles every time he takes the field. And it's unbelievable because I watched him at Wisconsin, knew he was on the Saints, had no market whatsoever, signed a 1 year deal. And now he's going to be an in-demand free agent as a wonderful linebacker for the Eagles.
The other fun wrinkle in this is that Howie made a bit of a splash with the other linebacker he signed. Like, they signed Devin White, and that was the one
Right?
that got everybody all excited. And the guy that they signed as the afterthought is the one Devin White's not even there anymore.
No.
And meanwhile, Zach Bond's doing this. I'm glad you brought up Quinyon and Cooper. And for that matter, this is a battle between the two. One of these guys is going to win Defensive Rookie of the Year.
Yeah.
Quinyon Mitchell I saw you were getting into it with fans on social during the last.
I said
Thursday
Verse
night
is the hands down the best because he was dominant, and then everyone was like, "Whoa, slow down! You're not watching Quinyon Mitchell." Fair, he's been unbelievable too.
He needs the stats though. So if you can get a pick against Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp and Puka, maybe we can have that conversation. I'm really looking forward to that. Last but not least, we got another Hard Bowl on Monday night. Ravens also coming out here to LA. Jim and John Harbaugh. John Harbaugh 2-0 against Jim. Obviously, they had the Super Bowl, but he also beat him in
Thanksgiving night. Yeah.
Yeah. If that means anything to you.
I just know. Desperate Ravens team all of a sudden. It goes from like cruising, going to be fine, to now like a lot of questions. That loss to Pittsburgh opened up a lot of eyeballs around the league because their defense actually played well. Special teams was horrendous. The 2 missed kicks. They only ran the ball 13 times in a 1-score game. And Lamar wasn't Lamar. And like, oh, you thought you slayed all those dragons because you had a nice day against the Bengals defense. It was right back there. And now you go into Los Angeles, and the Chargers D, as we have chronicled throughout the season, has been outstanding. And Justin Herbert looks like the better quarterback than he's ever been. So 7-5 does not mean the Ravens aren't in good standing for the playoffs, but 7-5 certainly doesn't mean they're the heavies and Lamar's winning a third MVP.
I'm so glad the Chargers won that game the way they did. Like, it would have been cool if they had won 34-9 and just like, oh my God, the Chargers kicked the Bengals' ass. But to flirt with disaster the way they did and have the whole world like saying, look, see, they're still the Chargers. Nothing can fix the Chargers. And then they did it. I think that matters a lot to the guys that have been there. Maybe the guys that were there for the collapse against Jacksonville. I think that type of stuff matters when you sort of dig deep and prove that you can do stuff like that.
That was a classic chargering game, and they found a way to dig out of it. And like, I said it on Good Morning Football on Monday. Like J.K. Dobbins has no history with the old Chargers teams. Lad McConkey never wore that uniform, but that stuff's real. It haunts you. The logo, the uniform, the fans in that collective. But they're trying to slay dragons. That's a really good Monday night game. ESPN got a good one there.
Absolutely. Can I interest you in one more stat that I took the time to dig into? And I'll bring it back to the beginning of our conversation. Your son had to watch Baltimore only score 10 points in that AFC title game. This stuff, it matters to me.
I know.
The Ravens are 7-0 when they score 28 or more points. They're 0-4 when they score less than that. Like they have not found a way to win an ugly, gritty game. And I went and double checked. Every other team that's in the playoff field has won at least one game where their offense could only score 23 or fewer points.
Wow.
And some of these teams are really good. Like obviously Pittsburgh and Minnesota have done it a bunch, but like even Atlanta and Arizona, some of these more fringe teams have managed to win ugly games, and the mighty Baltimore Ravens can't do it. Like it's either all clicking or it all falls apart. And you talk about Detroit in the playoffs. I feel like that stuff matters. Like I need to see the Ravens find a way to win a game when they don't all look like MVP candidates.
No doubt. And you thought that was the case on Thursday night against the Bengals, and then they go right back and revert to what they were in their worst losses over the last few seasons. So we'll see. I would say give the ball to Derrick Henry a couple times. It might help.
Really good Monday night game. Really good slate of games. Peter, love chatting with you, man. This was
You're
a
the
ton
man.
of fun as always.
Thanks as always to Peter. Now, as promised, had a chance to check in with Greg Olsen ahead of his early window game on Fox. Dallas Cowboys going up to the Washington Commanders, just like everybody thought. Dallas Cowboys reeling at 3-7 in the midst of one of the more disappointing seasons in the entire league. And the Washington Commanders, even coming off of back-to-back losses, still surging, still surprising in the NFC East, still a very fun story, just like everybody expected heading into the season. Check out my conversation with Greg about Cowboys Commanders.
All right, Greg, this game feels like a very fitting example of how quickly life can change in the NFL, because I went back and looked. You were on the call for the last regular season game last year. Ron Rivera's last game in D.C. Cowboys win the division. They beat the Commanders 38-10 at FedEx Field. Dallas wraps up another 12-win season. Washington's heading for wholesale change across the board, not looking like they're going anywhere good. And 11 months later, here we are with Washington being the feel-good, fun story of the early half of the season. And I don't remember the last time the vibes were this bad around the Dallas Cowboys. It's just that's how quickly life can change in this league.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Life comes at you fast in the NFL, and sometimes it's just hard to put your finger on it. I think back to 2015 in Carolina, we win 17 games. I mean, we start the season 14-0. We lose a game. We finish the regular season 15-1. We go into the Super Bowl 17-1. We lose. So like, all right, we won 17 games, maybe, well, at least win 10 or 11. The following season, we bring back almost the entire team, exactly the same, and we won like 6 games. So like it's just a crazy league. It is so hard to sustain excellence. Dallas 3 years in a row, 12-win seasons under Mike McCarthy, and then the combination of just the NFL changes. That's inevitable. And then, you start losing every single marquee key player that you've had that they've played without extended periods of time this season. The rest of the league gets better. You play all the other division winners. The league is made to bring the good teams back towards the middle and the bad teams up towards the middle. And Dallas has had a little bit of a perfect storm this year in all areas.
It's a separate conversation, but that's one of my biggest pet peeves in sports is when people are like, oh, they'll be back. They'll have another opportunity. Don't tell me that, because you never know.
Yep. The only opportunity you have is that opportunity. And that's the way sports goes, man, especially the NFL. Like
absolutely
Chiefs of the world and, the Patriots of the world during their run. It is a sport that is designed to prevent dynasties. It's a sport to prevent teams from having sustained success. And it's a sport that's really designed for teams to not have sustained failures. And that's why when teams are amazing for a long period of time or at the bottom of the league for a long period of time, they're both kind of exceptions to how the league is designed, and really created from the ground up.
That's what's so cool about this Commanders season is I'm turning 36 here soon. And every team in the league, even the bad ones, like I've seen some great Jaguars teams in my life. The Lions have even before this year, even like they had some moments with Matthew Stafford. My entire life, I've never seen a Commanders team worth being excited about, at least not one that I could remember. So that makes it really special for them. I keep saying I'm so excited to see the success they're having. But let's dive into where they're at right now. Dan Quinn very emphatically says that Jayden Daniels is not hurt. He's not still dealing with that rib injury, but I don't know, man. Like I'm looking at his splits. He's running half as often for half as many yards. The downfield completions have dried up a little bit. He's averaging like a full yard less in air yards per attempt. He did not look comfortable to me against Philadelphia on Thursday night. Do you buy that, or like do you think it's mainly defenses figuring out what to take away from Jayden Daniels, or do you think maybe he is dealing with an injury?
I don't think it would be in Dan Quinn's best interest to just lie. I think coaches are very keen with public perception. And, the last thing you want to do is say if a quarterback is a little banged up. I know it's hard in today's day and age to come out and like, we don't want to tell people that they're injured, but it's also not in your young quarterback's best interest to say everything's completely fine and he's just struggling. So I take him at its word, but I'm with you. I mean, just watching the game, like not even looking at the box score, not even looking at the splits, like against Philly last week, underthrown balls, wide open targets that are thrown into the ground, maybe not as willing to take off and run as we saw early in the year. I'm with you. It does look a little bit different, but I do also have to think we need to keep in mind that there is at elements a little like, resort back to the mean. I think when teams come out of the gates hot, it's a new quarterback. What are we going to see from them? Different style of play paired up with Kingsbury, kind of a college style offense of blending backgrounds. It can kind of catch people off guard. And then the more film you get, the more things you put on tape, the more comfortable these defenses get with your tendencies and your strengths and weaknesses. It gets easier to defend teams as time goes on. That's why the best players and the best teams can continue to evolve and can continue to do new things each week to keep the defense off key. So I think it's a little bit of them maybe just settling back down to reality a tad. But when you look at their split for the entire season, early down efficiency, pass accuracy, like Daniels is still at or near the top. I mean, it's him and all the top name quarterbacks in the league. So I think even though maybe he's not playing, he was historically great as a young rookie quarterback to start the season. So yes, maybe he's come down a little bit, but relative to the rest of the league and relative to a lot of the bad quarterback play we see week in and week out, he's still having an incredibly good, to great rookie season. So I think a little bit's overblown, but I also think it's fair to say he's not playing at the exact level, but to expect him to play at that level for all 17 games of a rookie season is probably unrealistic.
I think that's really good perspective because yeah, it's okay to dip from literally historic, and that is some of the stuff that Jayden was doing in the first 5-6 weeks of the season. Plus, this feels like a game where he shouldn't have to do as much. Washington's got one of the most efficient run games in the league. Maybe Cliff Kingsbury can just hand the rock to Brian Robinson Jr. a few times and get out of here. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, and I liked what they did, especially early on against Philly. They went, pony set or whatever people want to call it. So it's Eckler and it's Robinson. They're both on the field at the same time in that split back gun where obviously Jayden Daniels is also a threat. So you really got three rush threats and then the play action and the boots and easy completions. Eckler's a great back out of the backfield in the passing game. And then obviously him and Robinson are a really good combo on the ground. So as long as the game plays to that style, Dallas struggles to stop the run. That's been well chronicled the entire season. So yeah, you would imagine that that's a good matchup for them. Take a little bit off your young quarterback, not have him shoulder so much of the load. But again, it's all based on game flow and teams that want to be run heavy and teams that think that the matchup is in the run. Now it's Washington's defense. And again, they're playing a completely broken Dallas offense. They're banged up. They're missing multiple offensive linemen. They're missing Dak Prescott.
Yeah.
It's a really difficult situation right now for Mike McCarthy in this offense. So if Dan Quinn and this defense can continue to play just solid and keep the score down, yes, you would imagine there is a big matchup advantage in Washington's favor on the ground game, especially when you factor in let's start getting our young quarterback back up to speed. Ground game, run, play action, easy throws, quick completions. That's what he was when he was at his best early in the season, high completion percentage, and see if they can rediscover some of their magic this week against Dallas.
My only question for you on the Cowboys front of this is, and I don't even know how much it really matters because, again, injuries on the offensive line, it was brutal seeing Zach Martin dealing with injuries on Monday Night Football. But people are going to talk about the quarterback. I mean, Cooper Rush hasn't been great for him since taking over for Dak. It's going to lead to questions about Trey Lance. It already has. Mike McCarthy said this week that he thinks they'll have a package for Trey. I'm just curious from your perspective as a guy who played for a long time, how do you handle the locker room with that? I mean, like, and are players giving McCarthy input? I mean, fans are going to clamor to see the guy who's not playing because the backup quarterback's always the most popular guy. But how do you handle the locker room with that when it's very obvious that a quarterback change could be coming eventually?
I think it's really tricky. I think coaches and front office personnel in lost seasons, barring some drastic turnaround here, we'll just keep it for where we know things are at the moment. In a lost season, there is always the desire to say, okay, who are these draft picks? Who are these guys in Trey Lance's case? Who's this guy we gave up draft capital for last year? Who are these young players we haven't seen a lot? Now, some young guys have been thrust into action earlier than they wanted due to a lot of the injuries. It's for some of their starters and veteran players. And now you're at the point of the season where maybe there's other positions where, you got some young linemen and Zach Martin's going to be gone in free agency. He's been a long time all-pro, potential Hall of Fame type lineman, but you might not have him next year. Like, these are quality game reps. So there's always the urge to say, okay, let's test our roster and see what it looks like going forward. But then there's always the locker room. And there's always the CeeDee Lambs of the world and the Donovan Wilsons of the world that are like, don't you dare give up on this season. I'm not going to go out there and bust my ass every single day. And we've waved the white flag. And this is just, hey, let's get a look at this like it's a preseason game and we're trying to evaluate our roster. I'm not into that. So it's a very delicate. Can you put enough guys on the field to give yourselves a competitive chance every single week? Because make no mistake about it, Mike McCarthy needs every win he can muster. Jerry Jones is only going to say, hey, we're playing for the future so long. He does not want to continue to walk out of those Sunday games embarrassed and do press conferences losing back-to-back games the entire season. So there's a very fine line between winning and doing what's right for the guys in the locker room, and also understanding developing your roster is also a key element in some of these losing seasons. So I don't envy the position McCarthy's in. I don't envy the position that Cooper Rush is in. We saw Dak Prescott have ups and downs, and Dak's one of the best quarterbacks in the league when he's healthy and playing the way we've seen him in this offense. So I look in Cooper Rush and I say, what do you want him to do? He's got one guy to throw the ball to. Now Jake Ferguson's hurt. He's got potentially 3 starting offensive linemen hurt. He was starting 2 rookies to begin with, left tackle and center. At some point, and they got 0 run game. So, like, at some point, what expectations have to be based on reality at some point. I don't know what they expect Cooper Rush or Trey Lance or really any of them to do. I don't know. I'm not sure what the options are.
I don't know either, man. And that the crazy thing about the Cowboys is, like, typically teams get to this point in the season all the time, but it typically happens around like Christmas where you've got 2, 3, maybe 4 games to play. The Cowboys are here with 7 games left. And like you said, I don't envy Mike McCarthy. I don't envy the guys who have to piece this all together for the back half of the season, but we'll see how they do. It's definitely not what I expected before the season for the first edition of Cowboys Commanders, but we'll see how it goes.
Absolutely. Hey, it's why they play the game, man. We might be sitting here next week and Dallas won and
It would be so
Who knows?
Cowboys for me to check in with you on Sunday afternoon, and the Cowboys have found a way to get it done.
That's the fun thing about the NFL, man. These guys are professionals. They still have a lot of good pieces on that defense. They still have a lot of good coaches in that building, guys with a lot of pride. Well, we'll see what happens on Sunday.
Absolutely, we will. Appreciate it, Greg.
All right, thanks, buddy.
Two huge games in the late window on Fox this week. At the same time, the Packers and 49ers are kicking off at Lambeau. The Arizona Cardinals are going up to Seattle to try to prove that their lead in the NFC West is no fluke against their rivals, the Seahawks. Makes this game a perfect candidate for on the road. It's presented by Honda. Dreams are unstoppable. My buddy Eric Williams is unstoppable as well. Fox Sports NFL reporter joining me to preview Cardinals Seahawks. Eric, what's going on, man?
How you doing, Dave? Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, man.
I remember talking to you in week probably 2, maybe it was week 3, about the Arizona Cardinals trying to get things right, trying to get Marvin Harrison Jr. involved. Even those of us that were bullish on the Cardinals, I don't know if we saw on top of the division heading into week 12. What's been, do you think, at least the biggest key in the way this season has gone for them?
I think it's two things for me, Dave. I think it's been the consistent way they've been able to run the football with James Conner and that offensive line, being able to dominate the line of scrimmage and making it so that Kyler Murray can and doesn't really have to carry that offense, that it's really more predicated on the running game, carrying the offense, and then using Kyler Murray in play action and to kind of play off of that. So that's been the main thing. And then defensively, I don't really know how they're doing it, to be honest, because they've had a lot of injuries on that side of the football. But for them to be able to kind of hold opponents at bay, keep them out of the end zone, to give their offense a chance to get back on the field, that's been impressive to me. So I think a lot of credit goes to Nick Rawlis, their defensive coordinator, for kind of patching things together, even when they've lost, guys up front. The guys that have come in to fill those spots have played pretty well.
Tell me if you think I'm getting ahead of myself, Eric, because I can't help but notice while this is happening, I just mentioned Niners are playing at Packers, and on Sunday night, the Rams have the Eagles here at SoFi. So the Cardinals could stand to gain ground on literally every team in their division. Like, it's not hard to imagine Arizona's the only team that wins this weekend in the NFC West. And if they do, they're 2 games ahead of the rest of the field with not that much time left in the season. I looked this up. According to the people that chart this stuff, a win in Seattle could push their playoff probability as high as 75%, which is a huge number considering where they were at the start of the season.
It is, Dave. And according to Tankathon, I think they have the 19th hardest schedule going into these last slate of games, 6-7 games. So you're right. If they're able to get to that point where they're 2 games up, you have to feel pretty good, I think, if you're a Cardinals fan, of the possibility of this team making the playoffs, which to me is kind of a year ahead of where I thought this team would be. I thought the run that they're making right now would occur next year when they're able to add more talented people in free agency. So the fact that Jonathan Gannon and Monty Ossenfort has this team competing for a playoff spot in the second year of this rebuild is pretty remarkable.
I remember in the preseason, I talked with Nate Tice about this, and we compared the Cardinals to the Detroit Lions and the rebuild from the ground up that they went through. And there is a solid amount of season left to go. But yeah, you're so right. Even as impressive as the Lions were, the Cardinals are almost on a faster trajectory where they have a shot at the playoffs. I mean, the Lions did come close in Dan Campbell's second year. They got to the last weekend of the season before they were eliminated. But man, if they could actually get into the postseason a year ahead of schedule, what an impressive story that would be. I'm glad you mentioned the Cardinals defense. I don't think the casual NFL fan, for that matter, I don't know how many professionals in the NFL media world can list off starters on this Arizona Cardinals defense other than maybe Budda Baker. But I wanted to talk about one guy in particular who's having a really nice season under the radar, and that would be their nickel corner, Garrett Williams. you look at what this guy's done this season, he's according to Next Gen Stats, he's only allowing a quarterback passer rating of 58.1, which is best in the league among slot corners. Again, according to Next Gen Stats, having a really nice season there, only allowed 1 touchdown. And I'm excited about that matchup because I would imagine he's going to have a lot of responsibility for Jackson Smith-Njigba, who is really looking like the guy people were excited about. I mean, he had a nice enough rookie year, but almost 300 yards in the last 2 weeks. He's only 3 catches short of his rookie number for receptions on the year. I mean, Jackson Smith-Njigba looks like that guy here over the last month or so. I'm really excited to see how that matchup goes.
Yeah, I agree. Garrett was one of the guys that they were excited about last year. He's coming off that injury. They wanted to get him healthy, but they thought that he could be a playmaker and a guy that could perform well as a slot defender. And the stats have kind of borne that out this year. And you're right, Jackson Smith-Njigba, that was one of the guys I thought had a chance to have a breakout season coming into his second year. Usually receivers from their first to second year make a significant jump in terms of production and development. They get a full off season to work with their teams and kind of work on the details. And you're starting to see that first round talent really show with the Seahawks. I think he's one of the most productive slot receivers in the league right now. Certainly kind of taking over as the go-to guy that's going to move the chains for the Seahawks. You see that Geno Smith is really looking for him in those gotta-have-it moments. And their chemistry is a lot better than it was as a rookie. They seem to be kind of off and had some miscommunications where, Jackson was running one route and Geno thought he was going to do something else. You're not seeing those things from him in his second season. So I agree. That's definitely one of the matchups I'm looking forward to in this game.
I thought it was so impressive the way, Geno was looking for JSN every single time against San Francisco last week. And more often than not, it worked. 10 catches on 11 targets? I'd say that's pretty good. Speaking of breakout stars, I mean, we know this guy, but I really thought Devin Witherspoon was back to looking like the Rookie of the Year candidate against San Francisco. I don't think it's a coincidence that Seattle also had what I thought was their best game of the season defensively. And I know George Kittle wasn't on the field. I get all that, but still looked like a much different unit. What role does Devin Witherspoon play in that? And for a team, I mean, they're 5-5. That reeks of inconsistency. Can the Seahawks build on what a strong defensive performance that was last week?
Yeah, I think that's a big key for this team because of his size. And they're playing him closer to the line of scrimmage coming out of that bye week, which I think he's better closer to the line of scrimmage. But you are concerned, is he going to be able to hold up in that running game because they're going to play a lot of heavy sets in terms of the Cardinals, and they're probably going to try to run right at him and see if he can match up to that. The other thing I think you should continue to watch is that second level of Seattle's defense. They made some major changes during that bye week, got rid of their 2 starting linebackers, brought in Ernest Jones via trade, and then moved another guy up in Tariq Rice in terms of the other starting linebacker position. And those guys performed pretty well against the Niners. But as you mentioned, George Kittle wasn't playing. And so that's their best edge blocker in terms of the offense. And so I'm interested to see how they hold up against the Cardinals running game, which has been so effective during this year. So definitely Devin Witherspoon, how he holds up along with those 2 inside backers.
It's definitely a cliche, but it fits for this game perfectly. Styles make fights. Like the Cardinals, I guarantee you are going to try to line up and run over this Seattle defense, get some heavy personnel on the field, let James Conner and those guys do their thing. And obviously at this point, we know Seattle's probably going to throw 35, 40 times because that's what works for them. I can't wait to see which of these approaches works better.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you mentioned Seattle, they're running the ball 35% of the time, which is 4th least in the NFL. They're in shotgun 80% of the time. It's almost like watching an air raid offense when you watch Geno, and what he's doing. Geno's going to make great plays, but he's also probably going to give you some opportunities to take the football away. He's tied for the league lead with 11 interceptions, although he's been pretty efficient and productive in the final quarter of games. And that's why they have the wins that they have right now. So I agree. It is a kind of a difference in styles and approach in terms of a team that wants to run it, a team that wants to throw it. But I feel like Seattle needs to get back to some kind of balance. They have one of the best running backs in the league. I think he has over 400 rushing yards in Kenneth Walker III. I think you'd like to see him touch the football a little bit more if you're Mike McDonald, that head coach who obviously comes from Baltimore.
Well, let's be clear. I'm sure the Seahawks would love to find some balance, but in the meantime, when all else fails, just get the ball in Gino's hands and see if he can figure it out. I mean, it's worked about half the time. I don't know. We'll see how it goes, but week by week, the most consistently unpredictable, entertaining division in the NFL. This one figures to be no different. Looking forward to it. Eric, I appreciate it as always, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it, man.
Time now for the Super Six presented by DraftKings. If you're not familiar, go check out the Super Six, foxsports.com or the Fox Sports app. You pick 6 different bets on an NFL Sunday, 6 props, game scores, catches, targets, yards. You know the drill. You pick 6 different bets, and if you hit all 6, you can win big. Such a fun way to follow along with the action, give you something to cheer for in a bunch of different games. I'm going to help you out with a prop that I feel good about. Question is, which player will have the most receptions on Sunday? Brock Bowers of the Raiders, CeeDee Lamb of the Cowboys, Amon-Ra St. Brown of the Lions, or Travis Kelce of the Chiefs? I'm going to go with the consistency guy. I'm going to take the rookie, Brock Bowers, to hit this prop, most receptions on the day. And the numbers right there speak for me. He's played in 10 games, started 9, and he's got 70 catches. 70 catches on 89 targets. So Brock Bowers is averaging 9 targets per game and catching 7 of those. He's only gone off a couple of times. Like, he's only got, I think, 3 games with double-digit receptions. Let me double check that. Yeah. Oh, no, only 2, excuse me. Only 2 with double-digit catches, but averaging 7 over the course of the year. He had 13 last week. He had 10 about a month ago. You can pretty much count on him getting up around 8, 9, 10 every single week. And I appreciate the consistency, and I trust it. Thought about going Amon-Ra St. Brown because he went off for 11 last week against Jacksonville, but with the amount of weapons on Detroit's offense and the fact that I trust Detroit to beat Indianapolis fairly handily on Sunday, what are the odds that he does that again? I don't think as good as the odds that Brock Bowers can produce 8, 9, 10 catches. He's done it every week. I'm going to ride with him to do it in week 12. I will take Brock Bowers. All right, now it's time for the NFL on Fox pod prop. But first, do you have a gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in New Hampshire, Oregon, and Ontario. Bet must win to receive reward. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see sportsbook.draftkings.com/ftball. DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns this season, and this week, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Download the app and use promo code GAMETIME. That's code GAMETIME when you sign up. DraftKings Sportsbook, the crown is yours. All right, now let's do this NFL on Fox Pod prop, which I'm going to keep it simple and go for an anytime touchdown. Had my choices, but I'm going to focus in on what feels like an easy game. That's a kiss of death, but Kansas City Chiefs playing the Carolina Panthers. Even with the Panthers playing improved football in recent weeks, this is still a game where the Chiefs should get back on track. And how do the Chiefs get back on track? They go to their Hall of Famer. It hasn't been the most memorable season for Travis Kelce to this point, but when the Chiefs were playing good ball, they were finding ways to get him involved here over the last month. 10 catches for 90 about a month ago against Vegas, 14 catches for 100 against Tampa, even against Denver, 8 for 64 and a touchdown. He fell off against Buffalo, obviously. Carolina's defense is not Buffalo. So I see Travis Kelce plus 105 to get a touchdown anytime on Sunday. I'm taking it. Chiefs are going to go back to the basics. They're going to look for their playmakers to get their offense going. That's Travis Kelce. Carolina doesn't have personnel that can keep up with him. So even if it's true that he's lost a step, it's not going to show up against Carolina. I think he'll have a big day. I think he will score a touchdown at some point in this game, which means my bet's going to hit. And that is my NFL on Fox Pod prop. Not a very heavy lift on the hurry up offense this week. 6 different teams are on their bye weeks this weekend. So there's just 6 more matchups we haven't talked about to close the show. Now that I've said it's easy, of course, I'm going to go over. That's typically how this works, but I'm going to do my best to keep that from happening. As always, we wrap up the show with one useful tidbit about the other games left on the schedule. I've got 2 minutes on the clock, courtesy of my producers. Just 6 matchups to go. How hard can it be? Let's start with Thursday Night Football. Steelers at the Browns. Maybe this looks easy for the Steelers because of the Browns' record, but Pittsburgh, an NFL worst 0-5 against division opponents on the road on Thursday night. That's kind of a mouthful, but they have struggled in these Thursday night games against division teams. Short week, short rest, small spread, just 3.5 points for the Steelers. I bet this one's trickier than it looks. Vikings at Bears. Minnesota Vikings 8-0 when holding opponents to fewer than 30 points this year. They're 0-2 when opponents score more than 30, but good news, the Bears are averaging 19 points per game this year. They haven't scored 20 or more since mid-October when they beat the Jags in London. Yeesh, Bears. Bucks at Giants. Since week 5, Tampa Bay Bucks rank bottom 3 in points per game, yards per game, yards per play. It's been rough. Maybe an opening for Tommy DeVito. We will see. Pats at Dolphins. How's this for an opportunity for Drake May? Pats haven't won in Miami since Tom Brady's final year in New England in 2019. Talk about slaying the dragon. That would be a fun accomplishment for Drake May to go down to Miami. I don't know if the Pats are up to it, but it'd be an interesting storyline to follow. Titans at Texans. Here's a stat for you. Only Caleb Williams and Cooper Rush have a worse passer rating than what CJ Stroud has been putting up since week 7. Quarterbacks with 100+ attempts since week 7. Only 2 have been worse than CJ Stroud. It's been hit or miss for the Texans. Titans are the number 2 pass defense in the NFL. I think the Texans win, but this might be a sloppy one for Houston. Finally, Broncos at Raiders. Talk about slaying dragons for rookie quarterbacks. Did you know Denver hasn't won against the Raiders on the road since 2015? Since Peyton Manning was the quarterback? They have never won in Las Vegas. Big opportunity for Bo Nix to change that. And that is my time. Nailed it. Love when a plan comes together. That does it for the show. Enjoy your week 12. So much to look forward to. And we will be there on the other side of it, as always, on Monday. Check your feed. Make sure you're subscribed if you're not. Spotify, NFL Podcast, Monday morning. We will be here to recap it all with you. We will have news, insight, analysis from our Fox NFL on Fox insiders, recapping everything we saw, what we think, what we know, what to expect. Always looking forward to it. A loaded NFL Sunday in week 12. We will talk to y'all when it's over. As always, I appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.